Hello, welcome to Computer Tech and More. Today we're going to be taking a look at the ToughFan 12 and the ToughFan 12 Turbo, joining forces to defeat all comers. No, I'm kidding. This is part of my redone series where I redid all the noise testing in my fans. So let's get right into the details with a little bit of explanation. So first, a little bit of background. My previous testing and methodology I found was not giving me the accuracy and the data that I specifically wanted. Basically, I was placing my microphone too close to the fan and it was doing closer to a simulation of if I had a mesh filter or the fan was at the back of a heatsink, that sort of noise interference or the interaction between the blades and another object, and creating extra noise that really the fan isn't generating except in a few select circumstances. So in the future, I am going to be testing more closely how the fan acts in a pull configuration on a radiator, just to generate some of that noise data. But I found that it wasn't doing what I wanted. So the future testing has a measuring stick. I put the fan at a distance from it, and I generate it as though it's in an open air type environment, which more closely simulates that of a case or a fan inside a computer case, where the filters generally are a little bit further away from the fan, so they don't get that sort of interaction. The other part is the overall accuracy of my test. So previously, I was in an accuracy range of plus or minus 4 decibels. The new test methodology gets me a range of plus or minus 2 decibels. So the new one is a 4 decibel range. The previous one was an 8 decibel range, and every 10 decibels is a doubling in noise volume. So it's a pretty significant change. This leads me to where I'd like to go with this channel in the future. And this is where I do need help from viewers like you, supporter, joining me on Patreon, whatever it can be, is I want to get a dedicated microphone for noise testing. Right now I'm just using the one that's recording my voice on right now. And it's great for doing overall decibel levels, but it doesn't have quite the overall accuracy for fine-tuned measurement for how the fan is generating noise in terms of a spectrum. It's just not quite as accurate for that measurement. I also want to make a little sound chamber to drop my noise floor for my method of testing a little bit lower than what I'm getting right now. I want to upgrade my anemometer. Right now, its accuracy is plus or minus 0.1 meter per second. I'd like to acquire one that is in the accuracy range of 0.01 meters per second. Now, that may not seem like a big deal, but it will create more of a differentiation between these fans, even though in terms of what it's going to do inside your computer case may not equate to overall that much. But in terms of heatsink airflow, it could equate to more than you realize. I would like to build myself a test system specific for doing testing. Doesn't need to be particularly high-end, but all this is going to add up to more than $1,000. So this is just me going, this is where I'd like to go in the future, and I'll test all the fans once again, going through them all, however many I've tested at that point, with the latest and greatest in testing methodology. Until I reach that point, I'm going to continue doing testing this way. So that leads me to what we're going to be covering. So if you're new to this channel, I do recommend that you see the second half of this video where I go over explanations as to what each of the tests were, how they were performed, why they're important, how to use the data, that sort of thing. If you're returning to this channel, you can just watch this overview and be one and done, because this is going to just go, this is where we were, this is where we are now, and how things have changed. So on all these graphs, I have the fan ranking. The models are in alphabetical order, not by brand, they're just straight up alphabetical. The RPM the fan was running at, and the type of test. So this was, the first one is through the CPU air cooler, noise normalized testing. And then the only difference is at 100% PWM fan signaling, there's a noise column. So let's get into each of the graphs, or tables. So first up, we have performance through the CPU air cooler, noise normalized, and the ToughFan 12 and the ToughFan 12 Turbo were 18th and 21st respectively, and they're now ranked 15th and 1st respectively. So the ToughFan 12 is ranked 15th, the Turbo is ranked 1st. So that is a significant improvement and overall a great position to see on that they've actually improved in their position. At 100% PWM fan signaling, the ToughFan 12 retains its position at 22nd. The Turbo retains its position at 9th. And cooler value proposition, noise normalized. The ToughFan 12 was ranked 25th. It is now ranked 22nd, so a small improvement in position there. The Turbo was ranked 34 and is now ranked 21, so a actually pretty significant improvement in position there. At 100% pitot fan signaling, the value proposition for these fans, the ToughFan 12 retains its position at 37. The ToughFan 12 Turbo retains its position at 36. CFM testing, noise normalized. The ToughFan 12 was ranked 17th. It is now ranked 19th. The Turbo was ranked 22. It is now ranked 6th. So one lost a little bit of position, the other gained a little bit of position. At 100% PW fan signaling, CFM testing, the ToughFan was ranked 31 and retains that position. The Turbo was ranked 14 and retains that position. The value proposition, CFM testing, noise normalized. The ToughFan 12 was ranked 27th. It is now ranked 25th. The ToughFan 12 Turbo was ranked 39th. It is now ranked 26th. Value proposition, CFM testing, 100% PW fan signaling. The ToughFan was ranked 35th, retains that position. The Turbo was ranked 33rd and retains that position. Next up, we're on the case simulation test. 6-inch mark, noise normalized. The ToughFan 12 was ranked 9th. It is now ranked 14th. The ToughFan 12 Turbo was ranked 19th. It is now ranked 5th. So they flip-flopped in position overall. The 11-inch mark, noise normalized, case simulation test. The ToughFan 12 was ranked 10th. It is now ranked 7th. The Turbo was ranked 14th. It is now ranked 4th. An overall improvement in position for both these two fans, but fairly effectively the same overall air speed. Or I should say very similar. Value proposition, 6-inch mark. The ToughFan 12 was ranked 25th. It is now ranked 20th, so a small improvement there. The Turbo was ranked 33rd. It is now ranked 18th, so a pretty significant improvement for that one. At the 11-inch mark, the ToughFan 12 was ranked 16th. It is now ranked 14th, so a small improvement in position. The Turbo was ranked 28th. It is now ranked 16th. So a pretty significant improvement for that fan. All right, now we're getting to the specific graphs. So this is just for a little bit of kicks and giggles, showing how the trend in 120mm class fans. 140mm is still a wild, like the Wild West. Fan designs are coming out in different shapes and sizes, but it seems like they've narrowed down the 120mm class, to a very specific design that is very reminiscent of the General Typhoon, which came out before the rest of these, and became most popular with the A12X25, or at least most popular as far as I know, with the ToughFan 12 being considered a copycat of the A12X25, but there are very subtle differences between it. But I just wanted to show off, I guess, modern fan designs. So the first of the graphs is in my case simulation test. You would use this data to determine which fans are best suited for your particular size case. Now I took key measurements that roughly estimate where your air cooler would be placed inside of different size cases. So a small form factor that is still an open airflow design, so front to back airflow, not ultra compact, that sucks in air from the sides and blows it out the top, or sucks in air from the bottom and blows it out the top, where it has to wiggle its way through all the components. So I'm talking an open airflow designed small form factor case. That would be the 6-inch mark. It also would be very representative for short throw distances, something along the lines of blowing air directly into your GPU, so it'd be bottom mounted blowing up. That'd be very representative for that 6-inch mark. The 9-inch mark is representative for a compact tower. Something along the lines of like a Dell Optiplex is what I can think of, where it's just basically a shorter tower that may not be, it most likely won't hold a standard ATX, but it might hold an MATX still lengthwise, so your GPU won't actually be longer than the standard motherboard length. Something along those lines is where I imagine the 9-inch mark to be. The 11-inch mark is representative of your standard mid-tower cases. Something along the lines of the Corsair 500 series, Meshify 2C, Meshify C, I don't remember their standard naming as it goes right now, but something along a mid-tower case. And then the 14.5-inch mark is representative of big towers. Something like the Fractal Design Torrent. Now, what isn't addressed with this testing is side airflow. So how the fans interact when they blow air into the case from the side, because it has to take a turn there. It's going to make the air more turbulent traveling through the case. So if you're going for an air cooler, that type of case is not recommended overall because the airflow won't be as well optimized. So what I mean by all this is, for an air cooler, yes, let's go to this one. You want the air traveling through the case, so that's where my mouse cursor is right now, hitting this fan at as high an airspeed as possible, while still being in the realm of what you consider like acceptable noise level. And the reason for that is this fan is spinning, so it's drawing air into it. If there isn't air being fed into it, so let's just say it's in a static air environment, it's basically pulling a vacuum of air, and that air is filling in the space around it. It's being sucked in. So that means this fan is having to work a little extra hard to suck that air in and then push it through. If the air is literally being force-fed to it by another fan in the front of the case, then this fan is going to operate a little bit more efficiently, thus providing better cooling overall. Now, for case temperatures, like temperatures inside the case, as well as the like motherboard temperatures, your fans are not going to affect those as much. But in terms of your CPU cooler and your GPU, having optimal airflow going to it is going to improve the temperatures, the thermals of those devices. And then, of course, you want to be able to get the air out of the case. But that is a different story. So airflow that hits the case, so let's say you have a heatsink, and these fans are in a push configuration. The heatsink or radiator is going to naturally straighten out the airflow coming through it, so the air exiting the heatsink, so this would be actually very applicable if you're front mounting a radiator, would be coming out in a smooth laminar, like smooth flow pattern, actually creating a very appealing like airflow going through it, assuming that it's high enough in airspeed. So the fact that if you have a poorly designed fan that spews air off to the side, it will be naturally straightened as it goes through the heatsink or the radiator. So thus, the actual airflow pattern through those devices doesn't matter as much. However, I'm of the opinion you want a good airflow no matter what, and having one that creates a nice concentrated airflow just is going to be more usable for you, the consumer, in more scenarios, because it means you can rip it off and use it as a case fan. You can put it on a radiator, you can put it on a heatsink, and it's going to be just as effective in each of those roles, as opposed to a old style radiator fan that spews air off to the side where it's only good in one type of thing, and that's radiators. So now you might be wondering, why does all of this matter? Well, this is a diagram for actually a ceiling fan. So as the air is pushed down the case, so you can actually use it as like a good visualization. There is air in the case. It's being pushed out of the way by the fan, by everything underneath the fan, but the fan naturally will spread out the airflow. If the natural airflow is too wide, then more of this air surrounding it that isn't moving is going to grab hold of it and slow it down even faster, and thus creating an inward cone shape of slower and slower moving air. While if it has a nice funnel of concentrated high air speed, the slower air around it is going to eventually slow it down, but it'll be harder for it to actually penetrate and slow it down as effectively. So that's why it's important. So that brings us to these graphs. What you want to see for a good case fan is as flat a line and as linear a line as possible. What you don't want to see is a very steep drop off right at the beginning and then it level out. That would indicate a very poor performing fan, and the reason it levels out at the end is because there's literally no airspeed left for it to move, so it's leveled out. So we have the two fans on here. The RPMs are listed in 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100% PWM fan signaling. You can directly compare it if you so choose, but let's move on to the next graph. Now we're taking a look at the two fans versus my control. My control is base 3 parts A12 X25 to 1 part A14. And the reason for this is that I found 120mm class fans did really well in the 6 and 9 inch marks, while the 11 and 14.5 inch marks were better with 140mm class fans. So by blending the two fans together, I hope to create a sort of, quote, perfect fan, or at least an idealized fan for other fans to try to beat. So it's in fact like a 130mm class fan. So the control is this teal color, the ToughFan Turbo is green, and the ToughFan Regular is in blue. And right away we can see that the Turbo has some weird behavior where it drops off very quickly at the 14.5 inch mark. So in larger cases it's perhaps less reliable. But the regular ToughFan, which shares everything the same about it, meaning the blade design, the frame design, the only difference is the motor is actually sticking much closer to the control fan. And they do have a little bit different RPM. I believe it's a little bit outside of error, meaning variances between one fan to the next. So brings questions into quality control for the ToughFan series. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad result, because you see that the turbo is outperforming the regular ToughFan. So if you average the two, it would still be a little bit over my control fan at the 6 and 9 inch marks, while at the 11 they're basically equivalent to my control fan, and the 14.5 inch mark they're underperforming compared to the control fan. At 100% PWM fan signaling, over here we got the fan name, the RPM, and the noise level. So interestingly, the turbo and the regular ToughFan have the same noise level of 21 decibels. So at least you're not generating any more noise, right? But the ToughFan turbo is outperforming the regular ToughFan, but the regular ToughFan is in many scenarios slightly underperforming compared to my control fan. But as you get to bigger cases, it is outperforming my control fan ever so slightly, while the turbo is actually underperforming my control fan. So go figure. Now, how do they compare against other fans? Well, at shorter distances, the ToughFan turbo is easily ranked at the top. So if you're wondering how these are ranked, so this category at the top is what I consider to be good fans. Down here is what I consider to be a poorly performing fan. And you might be saying, well, the Wonder Snail, this yellow line, really isn't a high-performing fan. But if you look at the 14.5 inch mark, it is performing really well. So I use it as the bottom end of what I consider to be a good fan, while the Silent Wings 4 Pro is sitting at the other end. It starts off really quite good and then drops off. So it sits at the bottom end at that scenario. So it just gives you some perspective overall. So the ToughFan series actually is looking pretty good overall. The turbo has got this weird behavior where it's dropping off right at the end. So I'm not so sure about that. So maybe just some consistency problems. But they look pretty good overall, but maybe in not ultra large cases. How about at 100% PWM fan signaling? Well, the turbo is doing better at the 6 inch mark, but then the two fans are functionally equivalent for the rest of case sizes. Meaning they're at the bottom end of what I consider to be good fans, but they're certainly in that good fan category. So there's no problems with buying them and using them, so should you choose. Next, we're going to take a look at airspeed versus decibel rating. So this is done at the 9 inch mark. And the 9 inch mark was chosen because a lot of fans tend to have drop-offs in airspeed at the 9 inch mark. They're not listed in these graphs. But I needed the airspeed high enough, and I wanted to have a standardized data point. So anything under 0.5 meters per second, I get less consistent readings. So that's why the 9 inch mark was chosen, because pretty much all the fans I tested maintained as airspeed over 0.5 meters per second at that point, while other ones didn't achieve high enough airspeed at the 11 inch mark, and I didn't want them to just be zero airspeed, all noise. Very similar to actually what we're seeing with the S12B, except even worse, if that can be imagined. So we can take a look at these graphs, and the turbo right here actually tracks fairly nicely, nice steady climb, levels off a little bit, and then it climbs up again in terms of airspeed vertical, noise horizontal. While the regular ToughFan basically tracks very, very similarly, except once you get at the higher airspeeds, it's actually a flatter line. It doesn't lose a little bit of ground. So maybe just some consistency issues is what I'm thinking. And interestingly enough, the ToughFan ending up at slightly better airspeed than the turbo. So go figure, the RPM didn't matter that much for this particular test. Let's move on to the next testing. ToughFan 12. ToughFan 12 Turbo. Now we're on to airspeed through my CPR cooler, the Noctua U12A. It is a larger single tower cooler, so it better simulates a radiator, which I don't currently own a radiator. I'd like to add that to my testing, so if you got suggestions, leave that in the comment section down below. So as I hopefully acquire assistance, I can put it as another piece into my testing to include and give you all even better data. But on these graphs, the left side is RPM versus airspeed. Airspeed is vertical. RPM is horizontal. On the right side, we have noise versus airspeed. Airspeed is vertical, noise is horizontal. On both these graphs, better fans are sitting top left, worse fans are sitting bottom right. And now let's get into the specifics. So RPM versus airspeed is literally a blade efficiency. It's how good is this blade design at pushing air through the heatsink. It is just as simple as that. And what do we see? Well, they line up very closely to my control fan, with the two ToughFans actually outperforming it ever so slightly. So that's pretty interesting. Again, the control fan is 3 parts A12X25 to 1 part A14, so it's just a mixed bag there. We'll see how that compares to actual production fans in later graphs. But we see that the turbo does have a higher top end thanks to its higher RPM. How about in noise efficiency? Well, here the ToughFan turbo actually is looking better than my control or the ToughFan. The ToughFan starts off pretty well and then it kind of descends and then perfectly matches my control fan, pretty much spot on. So that's definitely a good result for it. Just the turbo being a little bit better. Now, how do they compare against other fans? First, a little bit of explanation here. This 250W, that's 250 watts, equals 3, that's 3 meters per second. So I did a video where I actually tested each of the, a number of fans on my CPU cooler, running it in a CPU only load, letting it hit thermal max, and stabilizing the wattage that it could handle at that thermal. So the heat capacity for the airspeed going through it. I measured the airspeed exiting the heatsink with one fan on it. I then adjusted the PWM fan signal down a notch, let the temperatures and wattages all stabilize again, and I got the airspeed reading and I got a new wattage reading. I did it again until finally we hit 20% PWM fan signaling and its lowest wattage. So I got an airspeed to equivalent wattage. And this is a general trend. It's not an exact science because some fans blow air in a different pattern, so it doesn't perfectly line up. But in general, I would expect these fans to rank in this order. It is just a different way of doing it than testing one air cooler and what wattage a particular fan can blow air through it. So this is noise normalized. Oh, I should go back a second. Sorry. So how can you use this data? Well, you can use it as a comparison because in all likelihood, you probably don't have the same CPU as me, which is the i7-11700K. You probably don't have the same cooler as me, which is the Noctua U12A, which means these wattages improvements won't perfectly line up with your system. However, you can still use it as a comparison standpoint. So let's say you have the Kaze Flex 2. It's moving 0.2 meters per second of air for this noise normalized value of 12 decibels. Well, if you upgrade to the ToughFan 12 Turbo, you're now going to be pushing 1.5 meters per second of air. That is a massive improvement. Now, how much extra wattage are you going to be able to draw? I can't answer that for you without knowing more about your system, and I haven't tested enough systems to really be able to tell you how much extra wattage you'd be able to get anyways. But I can tell you that if your CPU is unlocked, so a K-series Intel, X-series AMD, and you have it overclocked, whatever, you're going to be able to draw a higher wattage for the same noise level if you have one of these lower ranked fans and you replace it with a higher ranked fan. Now, if you have a locked CPU, you're going to it'll be able to run at a lower temperature for the same wattage that it drew previously. And if you have if you've limited your clock speed, your system can run cooler, those type of scenarios. Or you can take this extra overhead because it's moving more air, turn down the PWM fan signal, and now your system is going to run even quieter. In case you think my normalized noise value is too loud for you, your system can run quieter if you get a higher quality fan. That's how you can use this data. So the ToughFan 12 Turbo is, well, ranked right at the top. The ToughFan is certainly in a great position overall, just a little bit behind the A12X25. How about at 100% PWM fan signaling? Well, just for a data point, where's the A12X25? I just saw it a second ago, right there, spinning at 2,100 RPM and 19.6 decibels. The ToughFan 12 is just a little bit noisier, actually well within my error range, so they could be considered functionally equivalent, and they move functionally the same amount of air. So that is a very good result overall right there. And the ToughFan 12 Turbo is outperforming my A12X25 and the ToughFan. And it's in a fairly good position. It is moving a very substantial amount of air for its RPM, being shy of the higher end 3000 RPM fans, while not being too noisy. 26 decibels is in line with like the P12 Max at 27.9, but the P12 Max is moving more air. So you just have to pick and choose which battles you want to win, I guess. How about airspeed versus decibels? And we can see that the ToughFan Turbo is sitting right at the top throughout most of its RPM airspeed range until it hits the very end, and then it sort of leveled off and then spikes again, where it finally tops out, while the P12 Max starts off at a relatively noisy level and then climbs very steeply and passes the ToughFan. So it makes me wonder if the Turbo had a even more powerful motor, just how much more airflow it would get if it would keep tracking that line or if it would actually just kick over again. Because every blade design has efficiency curves designed into it. The regular ToughFan is sitting just a little bit less efficient than the regular ToughFan 12, so again leads me to inconsistencies in the build process for this fan. But overall, still a very good result. It is definitely in the middle of the pack for what I consider to be good fans, and all fans listed on this I would consider to be fairly good fans. Now we're on to CFM testing. A lot of reviewers use CFM testing as a how good is this fan for case airflow situations. I completely disagree with any reviewer who decides to use it this way. And the reason is, I'm going to get into that in 1 second. First, how is CFM calculated? Well, I have a circular tube, so we have pi, we have r, and then you square it. That gives you the surface area of the cylinder, so basically a circle. So let's put r as in feet, so feet squared. We have airspeed of the fan blowing through, so that's in feet per minute. So if we multiply feet per minute times feet squared, we get feet cubed per minute, or cubic feet per minute. And you can use the units in meters per sec, or meters cubed per second, or whatever you want. It's just a unit of measure for a volume of air that is moving through a space. Now, the reason why I don't like it for using it as a judgment for how good a fan is at case airflow is because the testing is actually supposed to be done with the fan the same size as the tube. This is the way they do it in the labs. So there's no room for the air to spread out. So a fan that has a tendency to spew air off to the sides is going to look, relatively speaking, better in this test than it does in my case simulation test. Thus, because there's no room for the air to go anywhere but down the tube, it's going to blow down it anyways, so it's going to look closer in performance to one that has a focused airflow. Now, because a fan having a tendency to blow air off to the sides, its air momentum, so the amount of air force being pushed down, will be a little bit less. You'll end up most likely with the same result, but you're getting it for the wrong reasons, and it's not giving you all the data. If you watch any of my other videos on fans, you'll notice that some fans that perform well in this test really are detrimental in my case simulation test because their airflow is just that bad. So on this test, they'd actually look pretty reasonable. So this FAT test is just known for getting false positives for case airflow tests. Now, that's not to say the test is bad. You could use CFM testing to measure the airflow through your CPU air cooler or radiator, total case airflow going through your computer case. If you take measurements across several surface areas wherever you got the exits, you could get an estimated CFM through your case. You could also use this sort of testing apparatus to make your own at-home wind tunnel. You could use it to generate PQ curves. So you would need some pressure sensors. You need probably a pitot tube to get, you would need static pressure, dynamic pressure. You'd have a little hole with an opening in it. You'd need your airspeed going through it, and you'd be able to calculate airflow versus in pressure scenarios, and you'd adjust how big this opening was to get other pressure situations, and you'd get PQ curves. And those are valuable data for how good a fan is in different types of pressure situations, but it doesn't tell you anything about case airflow. So this test should be used applicably, and any reviewer that is using it to talk about how good a fan is in case airflow, you should completely ignore anything they say with regard to that because they don't understand aerodynamics. I'm an actual aerospace engineer. I have a background and master's degree in computational fluid dynamics. This is an area of knowledge for me. So I guess there's my little rant on this topic. All right, so we're going to go through these quickly. This is very similar to the heatsink test. Better fans top left, worse fans bottom right, RPM versus CFM, noise versus CFM. The control fan is right there, and both these two fans are, the regular ToughFan is almost perfectly in line with my control fan throughout most of its RPM range, while the turbo is sitting underneath it. In the noise level, they are doing a little better than my control fan until you hit higher RPMs, higher air speeds, where they do less well, particularly the regular ToughFan being noisier. Now, how do they compare? Small subsamples selection of fans I've tested. The noise normalized, the ToughFan 12 is sitting right here, and the ToughFan 12 Turbo is sitting right towards the top, but both of them being outperformed by the A12X25. And 100% PW fan signaling, CFM testing. We have the ToughFan 12. As you move up, we have the A12X25 sitting right here. And then just a little bit higher than that, we have the ToughFan 12 Turbo. Overall, they are in fairly good positions. And then we have CFM versus decibel range. And here the ToughFan 12 Turbo isn't doing as well as it was in the previous test. It just doesn't have the same peak. But it's overall in a fairly good position, while the regular ToughFan 12 is sitting at the lower end of what I consider to be good fans overall. So not a bad position for them to be in. So first up, the price. The ToughFan is a $26 fan. The ToughFan 12 Turbo is a $30 fan. So all these are based off of standard retail pricing as I could find it on Amazon. So as prices change or sales happen, the value proposition of fans does vary. So even a couple bucks off a fan can drastically improve its overall value proposition because it's literally airspeed per dollar. And depending on how much airspeed it has, a small relatively drop in position of dollar could have a significant impact in its overall value. So who is this data most specifically for? Well, if you're on an ultra-tight budget where you're trying to squeeze every penny out of your build, you want to pay special attention to this. This will get you the best bang for the buck. But this isn't best performance. This is best performance per dollar. So if a fan is cheap enough, it will, and its airflow is overall just barely good enough, it could still perform incredibly well in this test because its price was so low to begin with. So you just need to be aware of that. So if you've got a little bit of extra wiggle room, I do recommend that you compare this data to testing from the other graphs or tables or charts, whatever, and determine which fan best suits your particular needs for your scenario. What this doesn't include is longevity testing. I'd like to add that in the future, but it's just a little bit outside of what I'm capable of testing right now. What else do I want to say? Oh, if you've got unlimited budget, buy whichever fans you want. You got a little bit of extra wiggle room. Compare this data to the other graphs, and you'll get the best ratio that suits your particular needs. Whether you want RGB, a little bit better airflow, a little bit quieter fan, you choose whichever key piece of information best suits your needs. And for case airflow, if the fans are running at 100% PW fan signaling, something has gone terribly wrong inside your case. They usually shouldn't be running that fast. And how do the fans compare? Well, they are in line with other expensive fans. They meet up in case airflow 6-inch mark very closely with the A12X25. Mine, they're doing better than it in terms of value at 100% PW fan signaling, but they're basically middle of the pack overall. They are far cry from the overall best value of the TLG12. How about at the 11-inch mark? Once again, they are in line with the A12X25. Even at 100% PW fan signaling, they are a little bit better value than it, but they're more or less in line, and they're sitting around the average mark in the case airflow in terms of value. How about for the CPU air cooler? Noise normalized and 100% PW fan signaling. Well, they're doing pretty well. Functionally average, which isn't a bad position for being. So definitely good, I would say. At 100%, same sort of story. They're a little bit below average, but still okay overall. How about in CFM testing? So at a noise normalized, they're a little bit above average. At 100%, they're a bit below average. So now where does that leave me with this fan? Well, I think its airflow is very good, making it a very versatile fan, meaning if you were to buy this fan for case airflow and in a few years you wanted to hook it up to your heatsink, or you had a fan die on your heatsink and you need to hook it up, it would be perfectly adequate, and actually beyond adequate, for that scenario. It could just be used everywhere inside your case and you'd be basically perfectly happy with it overall. But you pay for that versatility with its price, meaning they spend extra time doing extra engineering on it to make it a better all-rounder, a lot like Noctua did with the A12X25. While if you get a fan that is specifically good for one task, it can be cheaper because it's only good at that one thing. So it's up to you to determine if you want the versatility or you want like practicality, like just a unitasker but as a cheaper price. And if you like its particular aesthetic. But nowadays the A12X25 comes in black, so whatever you want to choose for it. Let's move on to my wrap-up section. Alrighty, that brings us to the end of another excellent video, or at least I hope it was excellent for you. I like to present my raw data at the end of every video. This is for the ToughFan 12 Turbo, and this is the ToughFan 12. You are welcome to use this data for your own particular purposes, as long as it's only for you and it's not shared. Well, I shouldn't say shared. It shouldn't be in any sort of publication, journal, written, or video. If you do use it, I do ask that you reference me and my channel, because I'm the one who generated this data, and this data does belong to me using my own testing methodology. If you've got suggestions for other fans I should take a look at in the future, please leave them in the comment sections down below. I do read them, and I do try to acquire fans in the future. If you've got constructive criticism for me on how I can improve my videos, I do take that very seriously and I try to implement it. Just note that it may take a little bit of time for me to implement, because I do a whole lot of testing and then I do a whole lot of recording in basically batches. So it may take time for it to be implemented into future videos. Other than that, please hit subscribe. It'll really help me with my channel, and I greatly appreciate it for you joining me on Patreon. And for all my Patreon subscribers, I thank you very much. You guys are beyond belief for helping me with this channel, and I hope just the fan data that I'll be generating is a good reward for all of you at this point, since I'm still a micro channel. Anyways, have a great day, great night, great evening, and I hope to see you next time here on Computer Tech and More.